there you go. Okay, well, hi everybody. We are back. We're on our second talk on Romanesque, Tympana and Romanesque churches and buildings and stuff, especially in Burgundy and around that part of France. And so on your screens now, you should see a map. Can you see that map? Okay, great. So where we were last time, we were in Berze-la-Ville and we were in Autun. I propose just to finish off Autun, and then we'll go down and really talk about the Cluny and the whole Clunaic pyramid of, or the empire of Cluny. And we'll look at some, we talked about Gilbertus, I can't pronounce, I don't speak French, unfortunately, but talked about Gilbertus here, who was the sculptor. And we'll look at somebody called the Venice master. He worked here in Venice. He also worked in Cluny. He worked in ANCY-LE-DUC. We'll look at PARAY-LE-MONIAL, because Cluny is unfortunately been totally dismantled by those absolute brutes from the French Revolution. It's I think intellectuals can be more destructive than some of their less intelligent compatriots. So we'll look at PARAY-LE-MONIAL, which is actually a Cluny in miniature. We'll look at Berze-la-Ville, which is a small chapel, also a Cluniac dependency, where you can see the paintings from that period. So you can get an idea of what these bigger churches would have been like back in the day. And I think that'll probably do us for today. I hope we can cover all of that. There are a couple of other things. We might look at Charlieu as well. So this is the border to Burgundy. So Charlieu and Avesnes are actually not in Burgundy, they're down towards Lyon. But let's jump in at Autun, if everyone's happy with that. Good, so I will just change my screen and go across to Lightroom. So I did send you all, whoops, that's a bit, it's big. So I did send you all the links in a document, and you've probably seen within, you can click the link and you'll see the pictures. Hopefully you would have noticed that I've gone about, so here's the Autun Cathedral. So if you'll see that within the file, I'll have here the Tomb of Lazare, and then the next page I'll have a description. And so you'll see the same thing with the capitals where I've tried to label. I always do it afterwards. The suggestion that you made that I should have it before, because it'd make easier. But unfortunately, I'd have to go through about 100,000 pictures and change everything. And I'm so busy doing all the new ones. So anyway, so let's jump into Autun. You'll remember, if we just recap, in Autun, we have the cathedral, it's the cathedral now, but previously the cathedral had this old Carolinian building, which burnt down and was rebuilt, but it was itself already 400 years old when this lot was built, or 500 years old when the Lazare Abbey was built, chapel was built in about 1120. And you had these little various bits of Lazarus's so-called remains scattered around. Monks used to go around chanting things, and then they built the Autun chapel in Romanesque style. The monks used to go across on their stomachs through this, as you discovered, was the east door, which is called the north. That was the Eve portal with the Eve on it. And then within here, they had a complete reconstruction of the chapel, of the church of Lazarus in Bethany, in next to Jerusalem, 2 kilometers away from Jerusalem. And they used to, and then you had all of these different capitals here. So, and the monks, and then gradually this replaced the other one, and this became the cathedral. And then eventually they pulled down Saint-Nazaire Nazaire was some sort of local saint and supposed martyr.
Can I ask a question? You know,
Sure.
last time you mentioned the monks going from one building to another on their stomachs. And I thought, oh, I wonder if there's a lovely illuminated manuscript somewhere of monks on their stomachs. Or how does everyone know this? Was it documented? Because, you know, or is there a nice manuscript of it?
I've just read it in a description myself, but there are very, very good histories and written, contemporary histories written. And the person where I read it must have got it from somewhere. I mean, there were a lot of them used to go up on their knees. So, for example, in Berze-la-Ville, they would go all the way from the bottom of the hill to the top on their knees. And likewise in Rome, you had the steps that Saint Helen, you know, the mother of Constantine, brought back from Jerusalem, which were meant to be in the original steps that Jesus went up on, and people also still to this day go up on their knees. I think the idea is that you're meant to sort of experience the suffering, and by experiencing the suffering, you're able to sort of empathize. But I haven't read it myself in the original. So here we have, you can see the screen here. Yeah. So this was this perfect reproduction of Bethany, of the church in Bethany, and I suggested that they had been on the First Crusade, which took place in 1090. They'd seen this thing and said, let's go and let's build a church. Hugh I gave the land for this. He was the Duke of Burgundy, and if you see here, you can see behind there, this is the outline of where you can see here the outline of where that church was, that tomb was. So I just want to hop across to, you'll see on the side of, these are my, and we go to Musée-Roland. Let's go into Musée-Roland and into the medieval collection. I don't think I showed you this time. Tell me if I did. They had a group inside that church, inside that monument for Lazare. Lazare's remains were in the crypt. Did I show you this? Can you remember? No? Okay. So what this is the they had a group showing Lazarus in his tomb that's here, and they would have had all the bones that they'd pinched from Maximin, if you remember, further down in a little southwest of there. They had the Lazarus's bones in here, and they remember they had a body, they had a head, and they had an arm, and Avalon had another piece of head, and etc. Anyway, this here is one of the apostles. These are the two Marys. You can recognize this is Mary Magdalene because of her lack of proper headdress. And this is actually in Vion, and Christine can correct my pronunciation. She's French speaker, but Vion is just outside Lyon, an old Roman town. And this is where this grouping comes from, but evidently the same grouping was inside that structure. And so here you can see this guy is Andrew, and I know it's Andrew because it says so, which was fairly useful. Then you have the others, and these are beautiful sculptures, you must admit. So this is from 1110, 1120. Which is very, very ancient and much older than you'd normally think that you'd get these sort of things that are this expressive and this beautifully carved. So here you see the two Marys, and you could see the grief on her face. The other one seems to be saying hi, I'm not terribly sure. So anyway, so this was inside the tomb, inside there as well. And this, as I've said to you last time, the abbots themselves had this whole thing taken to pieces. And in 1760, which was before the French Revolution, it wasn't modern. They wanted modern stuff, and they didn't like to have old stuff. So if we go back,
so yeah, sorry, why is Mary not appropriately dressed? She's got something on her head.
yeah, but she hasn't got you always recognize Mary Magdalene because you could see her red hair, right? That's one of the conflated myths that I was talking about.
Actually, this is one of the Marys. This is the sister of Lazarus, I think, and she's holding the piece of her mantle to her nose because Lazarus started smelling.
Well, one of them is Mary and you're right. That's
because he was dead for 4 days.
Oh dear, bit smelly.
Right. You can always see you see it in the Renaissance representations as well. If they're holding their nose, generally it's the Lazarus story. Thanks, Uta. So then, so back to let's look at the capitals here, because I just showed you one or two. Let's just go. So here, this is useful. So again, when you're looking at my pictures, I would suggest that what you do is take an iPhone or take an iPad or something, and open the link there, and then you can have you can have it like this, and then you have on the phone have this the description, and then you look at the pictures on the other screen, and you're not jumping backwards and forwards. So, for example, this here shows the capitals, and it shows which subjects are on the different capitals. We can pop back to this later, but so suffice to say, so this is the Eve door where that comes slithering across from the Cathedral of Nazaire, and you'll notice that here first, when you walk in, is the presentation of the church. So they wanted to straight away say, Hugh gave this thing, so let's have a look at that one first. Just got to find it. It's up here. It's fairly late. This is the disadvantage of not doing a presentation in PowerPoint, but I thought it's better to do it this way because that's what Alex asked me to do, is just show you pictures and talk about them. No, I'm not seeing it. Where is this darn thing? Okay, well, I'll just start off with the others, and I'll bump into it as we go along. Well, we saw last, so I showed you this last time. That was, I think, the last one I showed you, which was Cain and God saying, "Where's Abel?" And there was Abel's body. Let's have a look at some of the other things. This is an interesting one. Can you see the whole picture? Yeah. So this is the tree of Jesse. So in the Bible, so the very important thing was showing the antecedents, and that there was a clear royal line coming all the way down to Jesus. And so there's a lot of trouble taken to show the ancestry. So firstly, there was the ancestry of David, and then going back all the way to Adam. That was in the Old Testament. And then in the New Testament, there's a similar thing saying Jesus went all the way back to David. And that was very important, as I told you last time, because it had legal consequences in the Roman Empire to prove it's an ancient religion. The interesting thing is in the Old Testament, this is the Old Testament, is that there are actually two trees and they don't agree. But then that's quite common in the Old Testament. There are two Mosaic laws, the 10 Commandments, there are two of them. There are two stories of the creation. There are a couple of other duplications, and that's because the Bible was patched together from different places and actually different peoples, and they had different versions of mostly even older stories that predated the whole Hebrew religion. Anyway, this one I think is very interesting in the way that it is such an abstract depiction what is normally a tree. Now, normally you'll see, if you think in those that you, if you seen other trees where, you know, you've got each generation and sometimes it looks like a tree or whatever. Here they show it very simply with just two of them. And I think that's pretty interesting. This is the dream of Nebuchadnezzar. I don't really understand it, but they really like Nebuchadnezzar. I showed you, I think, the other hanging of Judas, where Judas goes out and hangs himself. Well, here you've got the money bag. It's just like a different representation from Berze-la-Ville. You see the devils are pulling on the ropes that are strangling him, and his money bag of silver, the 30 pieces of silver, is in there. Very dramatic scene. This is the same scene that you saw before. In fact, you'll see it 3 times in total, twice shown in Berze-la-Ville. This again is the killing of what's his name? The death of Cain. So remember, Cain had the mark. The mark was placed on God. Actually, I think I showed you this one with the arrow going into his throat. This one is one of the abstract concept things. Here you have 2 virtues standing on the heads of two vices, and they are it's virtue conquering the vices. And I think I mentioned last time, this comes from the Psychomania. The Psychomania was written, I think, in about the 6th century, and it was very popular. So you probably know the Church Fathers, and Tertullian was one of the great Church Fathers, but he never made it as a doctor of the church because he joined the wrong sect at the end. But he wrote around about 192 AD, and was one of the very instrumental people in terms of structuring the canon and discussing the canon and what should be in and what shouldn't be in. And anyway, so based on Tertullian's writings, this guy wrote Psychomania, and Psychomania is the story of the 7 virtues battling with the 7 vices, and then eventually the virtues win. So it was incredibly popular in this time because, you know, as we've seen, they spend a lot of the time worrying about being virtuous and overcoming their vices, and apparently not terribly successful either. So that's Prudentius, his name was. So here we've got another one so this is Noah and the ark. You'll remember last time we saw it also, it was like a woven one. This ark looks a bit bigger. Here's Noah on the left. Here's Noah on the left here. He's handing a child up into the ark. A person hangs out of the window and is pulling the person in. I think this is beautiful. You got a sheep and an ox sitting inside the ark. There's a woman at the top looking out of the window. Some people have said this could be after the flood, and that he's sitting on top of Mount Ararat. But the fact that he's got an axe here in his belt shows that he's still building the ark. He wouldn't have needed an axe afterwards. And here on the side, I think this also shows, okay, these are details. And here you can see somebody picking up sacks of grain and bringing it into the ark. So once again, you wouldn't put the food into the ark if you just got there. You'd be leaving, right? So again, you look at the vegetation, which is quite spectacular and quite outlandish. So what we got here? Okay, we saw this. This was the Marys at the Jesus tomb, the tomb of Jesus. So let's have a look at a couple of others. This is a fun one. So here you see Samson. He's unfortunately being knocked off here. A child is leading Samson because he's been blinded, if you remember. Remember, he married a Philistine, Delilah, and she betrayed him. Actually, so he's leading him into the temple where you have all these Philistines, and there were eventually like 1,000 of them in there. And then he gets between the two pillars. This is him. So this is a two-part series. Here he's pushing the pillars and he brings the whole temple down and kills all the Philistines. And here you see him pushing his head through. And they're all, this is quite a clever idea to depict all these people who are actually sitting on the ground and not really on the top of the pillar, but it gives the concept, and it's I think it's quite spectacular the way that they've done that. The story of Samson is very interesting. We might see another one with him as well. Okay, these are just cockfighting. So this cockfight is highly likely this was taken from a sarcophagus, and it doesn't really have much meaning. Who knows why they had cockfights there? If there was a meaning to it, I don't know. It might be they just liked cockfights, and so they stuck it up there. As you saw, that especially here in Artun, where there's no real theological backing to this whole thing, it's just there because they wanted to have a place for Lazarus's remains, that there's not a very strong theological background to the whole icons and to all these sculptures. Okay, here we've got a basilisk. I like this one because you can actually see, can we make it bigger there? Yeah, come back here. Oops. There you are. Have a look there. You can actually see here the red paint still there. His eyes are still filled with the paste. So, you know, they drilled out the holes for the pupils and then they stuck paste inside there. And this is a soldier with a basilisk. So remember, the basilisk is this sort of depiction of evil, embodiment of evil. And then they're having a fight for whatever reason, but I don't know what the reason is. They say it's a faun and a siren. Yeah, okay. So what do we got here? So this is the stoning of St. Stephen. So you probably remember this story. Stephen was the first martyr. And so here there's someone saying, go ahead, go and kill him, giving the sign. And you remember what I told you last time about the sign language. You can see he's making a sign here, he's making a sign there. This has a definite meaning. The people, and this guy's also answering in some way. He's got a stone in his hand. These people are holding a second stone in the fold of their cloth. Here's Stephen. He's already got a few stones on his head, and an angel or somebody is reaching down to lift him up into heaven. So the interesting thing here is that, I mean, obviously they're saying this was the first martyr, and so that's why he's here. But the most interesting thing for me is that what was happening here, so Jesus died around about 30 AD, because he was actually born in 4 BC, which is 4 years before he was meant to have been born. But anyway, and he lived about 33 years, so he died about 30. Stephen was martyred around about 40, 42, possibly 43, something like that. And so very early on. And what you had here was you had 2 churches that developed. The one was the Jewish church, and the other was the Gentile church. I'm talking about the Christian churches. And most of the Christians in the 1st century were Jewish and were practicing Jews. And the only thing is they believed that Jesus was the Messiah. They used the same places to worship. They used the same books, everything. They were together in the same services with everyone else. And I mean, they didn't have synagogues in the way that one's got synagogues now. But the synagogues were a place of meeting where you met in people's houses and you did your thing, which is what they did. And they would have gone to the temple in Jerusalem, just like all other good Jews did. The only thing is they happened to believe this, and they also happened to think that they needed to tell everyone about it. And the people weren't that excited about it. They wanted them to get out of there. Eventually, became a disturbance, and they told them to leave. And according to the old Hebraic, the Judaic law, you could also kill people if you could, expel them, you could kill them, you could do all sorts of things if they were going against the beliefs too much. I think in some of the Orthodox Jewish versions today, it's still the case. You can wall someone up if they are going too much against the community. So anyway, that's why a lot of these Christian Jewish sects, as the Jewish Christians, they were practicing, they did all the Mosaic law, they observed the diet, they were circumcised, they did all that stuff, were driven out, and they went to Asia Minor. Anyway, that's an aside. Meanwhile, Paul did the whole Gentile church, and he came into had big difficulties with with James and the others that were still in Jerusalem, who were running the Christian Jewish church. Anyway, so that's Stephen. So what do we have here? This is the story of who was it? Jacob, I think, wrestling with an angel. So he was traveling, and I think you can see him traveling on the left here. So this is what the pilgrims, the interesting thing, the pilgrims carried their belongings on the end of a staff. So the staff was very useful because you could put your things over it and carry it. You could also bang someone over the head if they tried to attack you, and if the going was steep, you could use it for walking up and down mountains. So it was a very multi-purpose tool. So that's quite a cute little detail there. Then he lay down, he went, and there was this other person there, and he wrestled with the angel all night. And anyway, the angel didn't beat him, so he blessed him the next day, which I don't understand the significance of it. Here, what he's doing is he took the stone that he used for his pillow, and he built a monument or a building of some sort with this stone. So that's what he's doing there. I don't understand the significance of it, that there must be some theological thing. So if someone finds that out, please let me know. So what we have here, let's just get this. This is Daniel again. So here you have Daniel in his den, and you've got the lions. This is a very strange looking lion, but anyway, the lions are all creeping around there. And remember I said Daniel is the whole prefiguration of Jesus, and that's why he's always quoted. This is really a sort of a legal thing, saying, Jesus is real because of and was the Messiah, because Daniel said he would be, and Daniel was a prefiguration of that. So that's why he pops up everywhere. So here you've got an angel sending in Habakkuk. So Habakkuk is I don't know exactly how you pronounce it. He was a prophet from the era from Judea in the reign of around about the same time as Jeremiah. So that was what, 625 BC, before the Babylonians, at the end of the Assyrian era, and just when the Babylonians were getting going. And Habakkuk was one of the prophets. But then there was, remember I told you about Apocrypha and Pseudepigrapha. So the Pseudepigrapha are books of the New Testament that were written, that were used extensively in churches and everywhere, but didn't make it into the canon itself. And there was Pseudepigrapha are the same things from the Old Testament. And there's lots of them, and they're fascinating to read. And people, and as I said, up until the Counter-Reformation in about 1560, 1570, when the Catholic Church finally sat down and said, okay, what are you not allowed to read? That was because of those darn Germans, Luther and everybody pushing them and saying this shouldn't be there and that shouldn't be there, that they actually got around to chucking these out. So, but this story is about Habakkuk and Daniel. And so Daniel was actually written in 160 BC, so very late. And Habakkuk was doing his prophecies back 500 years beforehand. Doesn't matter. Someone wrote an apocryphal account of how Habakkuk was flown in by an angel and brought food to Daniel. So that's what this is, which is great because you wouldn't know about it today because you don't read this stuff anymore. But back in those days, this was really important. And what it shows to me is that the, again, the danger of interpreting things with today's eyes, this was part of what they read, what they believed, although it wasn't in the actual New Testament itself. It was still very much part of their teachings and part of their lives. So I think it's good for that reason. So what do we got here? Okay, this is the temptation of Jesus. This is, I think, the second temptation. I think the first one was with a woman, and the second is where the devil says, if you're the Son of God, then climb on top of the tower and throw yourself down and you'll be saved. And he doesn't. So here you can see him standing on the tower. And this has got tremendous dramatic movement. Looks like he's on the Leaning Tower of Pisa, but it wasn't invented yet. And you look at this, okay, again, he's making signs, but you also look at just the shape of the body, how beautifully it's turned, how the drapery is so beautifully following the bodies here. I mean, this is very dramatic. It's great movement. You know, the details of his feet on the cushion and everything, just stunning stuff, absolutely stunning. So, okay, here we got, I think this is, let me just double check. Yeah, this is Samson. So Samson had a thing for Philistines for whatever reason, you know, that. So if we go back to, let me see if I can just go back to the Israeli map here. Let me just show you briefly the map. I'm going to go to here. Okay, you should be able to see, this is the map of Israel. Do you see that? Okay, so here's Jerusalem over here. This is Galilee's up here somewhere. So here's Galilee's up here. And so we're talking about the period between 1000 and 1200, which is when a lot of this stuff, so that was the period prior to David and the kings. So that you had the period of the kings, but before that you had the period of the prophets with people like Samuel and the others. They were like prophet kings as opposed to warrior kings, which came later. What happened was you had around about 1200 BC, you had the sea peoples, where this massive displacement took place within this whole region. And what had previously, for the previous 400 to 600 years, been a highly cosmopolitan and very successful structure, got completely destroyed by these sea peoples. No one knows who they were exactly, but the ones that landed up here were called the Philistines. They moved in around about 1200, and what they were, if we go way back in here, can you see that? Yeah. So here you got Greece up here, and if you remember, in this area, they were the Mycenaeans. So the Mycenaeans, they eventually took over from Minoans in Crete in about 1450, but they were the top dogs here. And you remember here you had the Trojan War over here. That was the Achaeans, all the Mycenaeans. So the Mycenaeans got displaced, and guess where they went? Here, to Israel. And the Philistines were the Mycenaeans. And they were tall and they were different. And so Goliath was one of the Philistines. He was very big. And so they dominated the sea. You had Israel here, the state of Israel here, and then you had a very tiny little state of Judea. They were basically a non-player in the whole thing. And so the story of Samuel is the Israelites versus the Philistines, the Mycenaean, the Greek Mycenaeans. So anyway, as I say, he had a bit of a thing for Philistines, and people weren't very happy about that because you weren't meant to be he wasn't meant to be marrying, but there was this one Philistine lady that he really liked. And so he proposed to her, and then he was going to have his wedding feast. And obviously none of the Israelites came along because they wouldn't go along there because there were Philistines there, and they didn't like the idea that he was marrying a non-Israeli Jew, Canaanite, whatever you want to call him. And so he said to the wedding guests, there were 30 guests were chosen from the village where this woman was at, and he said to them, let me set you a riddle. And he set a riddle, and I just have to read it because I can't remember exactly. Something like, out of the mouth of the strong comes something sweet. You might remember it. I can't remember this. Let me just see if I can get this. No, I've got it written somewhere else. Okay, so the riddle was something like, out of the mouth of strong comes something sweet. And they didn't know what it was. Eventually they said, so the villagers went to his fiance and said, hey, go find out from Samson what the story is, because we want to know this. And because there was some problem attached if they didn't, he was going to give them something if they got it right, and they'd take something away if they didn't. Anyway, she eventually wheedled it out of him, and then she immediately rushed over to them and told him what was going on, told them the answer. And what it was when he was traveling along to the village, he had killed a lion, and he killed it with his bare hands. Here you see him killing it with his bare hands. And when he came back later, bees had made a nest in the lion's remains, and so the sweet was coming out of the strong. Well, anyway, he realized that she had betrayed him, so he called the wedding off, and he gave her to one of his traveling companions, which wasn't in her interest so much. And then he still went and married a Philistine later, who was Delilah, and then she had him blinded, if you remember, cut his hair, and then they could blind him. So I don't know why he kept going with Philistines, but he did. So that was Samson and the lion. This is the washing of the feet. It's relatively unexciting, I'd say. The washing of Jesus' feet. Okay, I've shown you that one last time. This is possibly enough on I showed you that one too. That was Peter in the prison. This one I wanted to show you. So this is the fourth tone. And when we get to the Cluny, hopefully, we better hurry up and get there. So there were different tones that were sung by the monks, and I'll show you more about it. This is the fourth tone. Cluny has all 8 tones. There are 8 of them. Why there's only one of them shown here, nobody knows. Again, it was what I said, it was pretty random what they put up there. It was based on which stones were finished at the time, and when they got because they built the church sort of bit by bit by bit. Usually they started, and in fact, if we could get to that other one, I could show you that. Yes. So usually they started at the choir, and then they worked their way along. And so as they needed a capital, they'd stick it on top of the pillar, and whatever happened to be ready got put up there. So you didn't have that strong a program. Okay, this one's interesting. So here you have Paul and Peter, and on the right is Simon Magus. Did I tell you about Simon Magus last time? Okay, so no. This is quite a fun one. So remember I said to you that you had the Jewish Christians that were by far the predominant in the first century in Israel, and then they moved out of Israel, and they went up to Antioch, and they went off to Izmir and those areas, or basically that whole Turkish peninsula they're mostly at. There were a few in Rome, but they were mostly in the Greek area, because they could speak Greek as well, because Israel had been Greek for the previous 300 years, and they'd actually stopped speaking Hebrew. They were all Greek speakers or Aramaic speakers. Anyway, Paul, you recognize Paul because he doesn't have the hair, And Peter, you recognize Peter because he's got the big key. Paul was in the Turkish peninsula, bopping around. He did like 3 or 4 big tours, and he set up all of these different, he set up all the whole Gentile part. And the whole thing about Paul was he said to the Gentiles, because there was a lot of pushback about getting circumcised, amongst other things. Also, they wanted to eat their normal food and they didn't want to have to follow the Mosaic law. And he said, you don't have to do it. So Peter was actually sent by James the Lesser. So James the Lesser was one of the brothers of Jesus. There were actually 4 of them in total. There was also Thomas, and there was a Judas that were brothers of Jesus. In fact, Thomas was the twin of Jesus. There's a whole theological discussion around that because Mary was a virgin, B, and there's all sorts of, it's another subject, fascinating one as to how the church has sort of wound its way around this topic and sort of manages to come up with a story which is completely non-credible. But anyway, so James the Lesser was running the show in Jerusalem together with a couple of the others, the old disciples, and he sent Peter to go and tell Paul that he's got to get in line because they're all good Jews, and you need to, and Christianity is a Jewish religion, and you must follow the Mosaic law, and you must get circumcised, and you must do all that stuff. Anyway, Paul came in 55 AD. Paul actually came to Jerusalem, and there was a council of Jerusalem where Paul came away and said, I won, and they agreed, and the people that were there said no, it was exactly the opposite. And but anyway, they steamed off and did that. So here's Peter. He's in I think it was Antioch at the time, and he and Paul, there was this guy called Simon Magus. So Magus is did I tell you about the Simon Magus? Did I tell you that last time? No. Okay, so the Magus is the magician. If you remember, the Magi are the Magi from the East. The Magi are actually Zoroastrian. In fact, they predate Zoroastrianism. It was the people that used to rule Persia in the days before the Achaemenid Empire came along, the Persian Empire came along. And so these Magi go back to probably about 1500 BC, 2000 BC. It's a very, very old and was incredibly respected. They were very knowledgeable. They were very able to do all sorts of miracles and magic. And the word magic comes from magi. And so Simon Magus was a magician, and he was pulling all these different stunts and doing things. But unfortunately, Paul and Peter were pulling bigger miracles than he was. There's one of these capitals somewhere, you see Magus has killed this one child, I think, and then Paul and Peter bring him back to life again. And so what Simon Magus does is he comes to Paul and Peter and he says, I'll give you some money and you're going to give me your Christian muti, and then I can do your magic, which is more powerful than my magic. And they said, no, you can't buy it away, you've got to believe, etc. And from this comes the term simony. Now, you've heard about simony. Simony is the purchasing of a religious office for the purpose of getting all the income from the office. And this was highly prevalent in the whole Benedictine order and in the whole church. In the 900s and the 1000s, the church had become incredibly corrupt. I mean, popes were appointed by families. The cardinals didn't even elect them then. And I mean, the priests couldn't read, couldn't write, had never read the Bible, but they bought a parish, or even better if you're a bishop and you could buy that. And then they'd never visit their diocese, or if they did and they gave a sermon, they didn't know what they're talking about, but they got the income from there. And so that's called simony. And you'll see in the Cluniac, a whole part of the main reason for the Cluniac founding of the Cluniac order was in order to overcome the simony, or especially in the Gregorian reforms. So anyway, so Simon Magus plays quite a big part because people are already against simony. And this is, so it's partly that. So here what happens is Simon, what Paul and Peter did is they challenged Simon to a fly-off, you know, like a dance-off or a bake-off or whatever. Simon said, I can fly better than you can. So Peter and Paul went zooming around the room in the air, and so did Simon. But then Peter and Paul prayed, and Simon came crashing down. So this is the point where Simon is taking off. And there you see him flying up in the air. And you could
tell us, where is this written down? Which document is that in?
The Simon Magus thing, I think, is in Acts. It's in the New Testament.
Okay.
I think so. I'm not terribly good at this stuff, so someone better than me.
You sound very good at this stuff, actually.
But it's pretty fascinating because he also had two ladies with him, but then so did Paul. He also had two ladies that were companions. You must remember this was the time of the Gnostics, when, you know, what is commonly called proto-Orthodox. So the Catholic Church itself.
It's in Acts, by the way.
It is Acts. Okay,
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Yeah. So okay, it's a rat hole, but I won't go to this rat hole. But if you ever want to talk about proto-Orthodox and Gnostic and all these other religions, what's now the Catholic Church was like mammals during the dinosaurian age. You know, something very, very small, and it was only 300 years later that they blossomed. And there were very large and successful sects like the Marcionites, that believed that the God that created the world was evil, and they believed the Jewish God was evil, or the Gnostics that believed that Jesus wasn't actually a man, but he was just a soul in the body, and that left before the crucifixion. They were the main Christian sects at the time, and so anyway. And women were very powerful, and they had an equal footing. It was the Catholic Church that had the misogyny and the whole male-dominated approach. Anyway, back to this. We can go on for hours on that subject. So here, look at it around his knees. You'll see that this is a magic trick, right? And also here, he doesn't have wings like the angel does. He's strapped them on. It's a great story. It's wonderful. Okay, here we've got. This is also from the Daniel. This is the three Jewish men in Babylon that Nebuchadnezzar put into, that he said to put them into the oven, and they didn't burn, and when they came out, so this is Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Funnily enough, that's not their Jewish names, because those are actually Babylonian names, and they're Babylonian gods' names, and saying something about what they do with the god. And you can read the Jewish names if you want to read the book of Daniel, but which again shouldn't really be in the Bible. But anyway, it's there. It's got nothing to do with Christianity or with religion, but it's got something to do with Jesus. Anyway, so this is a very, very popular topic, because again, it's a prefiguration of the suffering that Jesus is going to go through, and then he's resurrected. So it's saying this is the resurrection, the prefiguration of the resurrection. So it pops up all the time, and it's okay. We've done that. All right. So I think we've probably done enough here from our tun. There's plenty more. Please have a look at them. This is Isaac. This is Abraham sacrificing his son Isaac on the altar, you remember? And actually, this is the lamb. It looks more like a dog to me. But anyway, this lamb was in a bush, but they pulled it out of the bush and stuck it over here. There's the angel holding on to his sword and saying, don't kill your son. And this poor old lamb gets the chop instead. All right. So lots more. You can look at those yourself. Right, let's go. I'm sort of taking a lot of time here as usual. Let's go here to Cluny, if you like. This is a beautiful town, Cluny. Here's some of the old buildings. This is the town This is what remains of Cluny. So we're going to look down. This is looking down from the entrance, what used to be the entrance. So as I told you last time, those people in the French Revolution did is they not only destroyed all of the statues, knocked off the heads and destroyed them, but they also had them sold off as quarries. And so this huge church that was the Cluny church was dismantled stone by stone. And a couple of them you'll find in the houses. I'll show you some pictures. But a lot of it just disappeared. It is astounding. I'll just show you a couple of pictures of there's Ura patiently waiting. You can see the church there through the arch. And there's a picture of the rooftops. Beautiful little village, absolutely lovely. Anyway, so that's just to give you a sense of the place. Here you can see a house where they've obviously taken the windows from the church. I think if I go back, there's a couple more there. There's another one. These houses, by the way, are about 800 or 900 years old. So it's quite something. I mean, what does it say here? Here's the plot. House was modernized the 18th. It doesn't say when it was from. Okay. All right. So let's just, and if I go here to the abbey itself. So these are some representations of it. This would just, here you got you can see the cluster of chapels. This will be around the choir, and these are some of the buildings. It was a very big complex. Remember Cluny, so here, and this is Cluny 3. So there was Cluny 1, then there was Cluny 2. Cluny 3 started getting built in about 1080, and it was finished around about 1130. It took about 50 years to build. The bronze bits are the ones that remain. This and this, a little bit here, a little bit over there, but that's it, really, just this thing. And it's utterly massive. So this church was about 200 yards long and 100 yards wide. A little bit less than that, about 380 by something. And so if you imagine a football field or a soccer field, for football for those in Europe, soccer for us here in America, a football field is about 100 by 50 yards. So you must imagine it's 2 fields together and then 2 fields on the end. That's the sheer size of this building. It's incredible. It had about, I think, 1,200 columns. Each one of these columns had sculptures on it. It was just the most magnificent building. It was the biggest building in Christendom until St. Peter's got built in 1510 to 1600. It was the biggest building in Christendom. And as I mentioned last time, the Cluniac Empire was more powerful than the Pope himself. And in fact, they had a number of popes that were Cluniac monks beforehand and very much in the service of Cluny. The Cluny had around about 1,000. Let me just go down here. I've got something here. Here's a map of the Cluniac dependencies. So I haven't included England. You can see them here, but there's a big Cluniac community. See all these dots around here. Every single one of those is a dependency. There were priors, and so there were over 1,000. I think 1,450 in the late 1100s or early 1200s. And the unique thing about them was they were this was founded when I think William I of Aquitaine in about 910 AD, he got a large piece of land in the Burgundian area. So let me just show you this here, because here we got, so this is Burgundy. This blue bit is Burgundy. this pink bit is Aquitaine. So this is around about 1140. So it's sort of a little bit later than we're talking about, 20 years. This is that. Here we've got Toulouse down here. And then obviously you've got Catalonia down below. Catalonia and Toulouse are very closely connected. Their languages are more or less the same. You had Brittany here, and this blue bit, that's France. So this is Languedoc down here. This is Languille. So they said, here they said "oc" for yes, and here they said "oui" for yes, and that's why it's Languedoc and Languille. Anyway, and this is Normandy up here. This is the Normans. So the English had this bit, the English were Normans, so they had Normandy. And then you had Eleanor of Aquitaine marrying Henry, and so the English had a claim to that as well. So, and that was around about in the mid 1100s at the same time. So here you can see that the ruler of this lot got some land around about there, which is where Cluny is, quite a big piece of land. And so he created a charter which said that the abbots of this abbey that he founded there would not be in any way responsible to the local rulers, the local counts, or to the Duke of Burgundy, but they only reported to the Pope. This was a new thing, because so one of the big issues in this time, so the period 11th to 12th to 13th century, was feudalism. So the whole feudal structure had grown up roundabout under Charlemagne. It started under Charlemagne, where you had the Arabs down here in Spain, or the Moors in Spain, and they were pushing through. And if you remember, his grandfather, Charlemagne's grandfather, stopped him, I don't know, somewhere up here somewhere. I'm not that good at French geography. But they got all the way up, and then they pushed him back down again. And Charlemagne built up like a Maginot line all the way across here. And he went in and put towers, and then those towers gradually that was in the middle of Moorish territory, and then they'd go out and sort of just cause destruction and mayhem. And then gradually they built the towers up with more and more building around it. And in that way, they managed to push the Moors down further south, and Charlemagne was able to stop them from coming in that way. He didn't stop the Normans from coming down that way. They were still, in 900s and the thousands, the Normans were coming down and causing all sorts of grief around here as well. But what happened was, each of the people that owned these towers, that were in the towers, became the local ruler, because people would go there for protection, and so they got more rights. And unfortunately, they still had the old Frankish approach, which was very much, you fought with everyone all the time, and you divided your territory up between your sons, and then they fought each other, and the daughters married people, and they all fought each other until someone won and the rest were dead. And then it all started again with the next generation. And so this feudal system was incredibly disruptive. And one of the things that the monks did, or the abbeys did, is they brought this Pax, what is it called? Pax Dei, the peace of God, which was a proper treaty that they got all the knights to sign, and that they'd only fight on certain days, and that they wouldn't fight on certain feast days, and they wouldn't attack this person, etc. So they try to bring some sort of peace there. The other thing was the issue, and it became what was called the whole investiture issue, was that the local aristocracy reserved the right to appoint the bishops and reserved the right to appoint the priests. It was very important because it was a source of income. And they would draw income from the church lands. And you start in the 11th century and the 12th century, you can start getting the popes trying to exert their authority and say, no, hang on, this is our business, right? And so that became a very big issue too. So what's happening here is the Lord of Aquitaine, William, in 910 is saying in this area, which is in the Burgundian area, they owe no fealty to anybody in the area. They only owe their fealty to the Pope. This became very powerful. It enabled them to grow greatly. And so what it also said was that all the dependencies of Cluny owe all of their fealty to the abbey and no one else. And only the abbot of Cluny could appoint any of the monks or the abbots or priors or everything like that, and nobody else could mix in. And also all of the money, they had to send their money back, and which made them very, very rich indeed. So anyway, so that's the Cluny story, which I think is pretty fascinating. As an aside, you'll notice that Bruges and Ghent are part of Burgundy. So if you've wondered why Van Eyck and all of that bunch, why they were painting, it's because they were part of Burgundy. And Bruges was a very important port for the whole of Burgundy, and they did all the wool working and stuff like that. And in fact, if we go back to Autun, you will see in the where have I got it? Somewhere in here, there's the Van Eyck painting of Roland, who is the I got it somewhere anyway. Probably too much here, but anyway, there's Roland, who is the bishop of Autun. Okay, back to Cluny. So let's keep going, Cluny. So we have the abbey. Here's a plan of the abbey. Here you can see what's left, and this massive structure. The thing about it was that there's very little remaining, unfortunately. But what I can show, so here's one bit that remains. This is the sacrifice of Isaac. So this is the same thing again. You've got the angel on the right holding back his hand, and he's about to slag him here, to kill him. Here we've got the tones. Remember, you saw the one with the bells, which is the fourth tone. Well, this is the tones of the Psalms. Here's the first tone. Now I'm going to give you, let me see if I've got it here. I've got it. Hopefully it's going to work out. So this, if you listen here, this is the first tone being sung. Da, 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 da. Did you hear that? Good. Okay. Right. So let's go back again. So I could do all 8 of them, but I think you'd get awfully bored. But if you want to, please do. So this is the 8th tone of the Psalms. And then there's a second tone and the 4th tone, so it goes on. And this is very important because, you know, they were singing these, and Cluny was a great, they made sure that all of the Clunaic dependencies, all 1,000 of them at that stage, that they all were doing this. So here you have the first tone where he's playing on some sort of stringed instrument. This is first. Here you've got the second tone. He's playing cymbals. You can see them in his hands. Here's the third tone. And it's the fourth tone. Sorry, he's playing a carillon. That's the fourth tone with the bells. I think the other one's easier to see, the one that we saw in Autun. So anyway, that was interesting. These ones, they're horribly badly mangled. So I'm not going to really show you them there. These are the liberal arts. They had every topic you could imagine there. What I can show you is in the museum, you've got some. Here, yeah. So you've got some heads that remain. Some Peter. There's the keys of St. Peter. So the big thing about Cluny was that they had the remains of Peter and Paul. And this was about as good as you could get. I mean, until Louis went off and got the nail and the crown of thorns, which luckily survived 1,000 years for an organic substance, pretty good. So anyway, but they had massive power and huge pilgrimage, which of course was good money because of owning. Paul and Peter were the main things. They actually had everybody. I think they had all 12 apostles, and they had just about anybody else who walked and talked in the whole of the Bible, and all the bits and pieces that they carried. So they really did a good job there. What you can see are these things. So this is a frieze that went around. Here's the frieze. So there's a picture of it somewhere. Yeah. So this is, here you can see, you see this frieze running along here. And you must imagine this thing is like 200 yards long on either side. So it must have been a heck of a frieze. And here you can see all the different objects. I'll just go slowly. I'm not going to say anything. I'll just show you. You can just look and see. So generally what I do is take a big one and then I'll show you the individuals. So you can see lots of beasties of different sorts, lots of humans that are fish at the same time and everything else like that. So not terribly religious, but probably a lot of it's taken out of the local Celtic law, L-O-R-E law. And I can go on about Celts and stuff like that because the Gauls were Celts and they were still very active in the 1000. They had the Druids and they were very knowledgeable. It was a very great religion, and Julius Caesar murdered most of them. Okay, so that's Cluny itself. Let's just have a look at PARAY-LE-MONIAL. So PARAY-LE-MONIAL was built very quickly. So this is what Cluny would have looked like. Evidently, it's very, very similar. So what happened was, they were building this thing from 1080 to 1130, so it's 50 years. And what Uda and I saw in traveling around when we saw quite a lot of these churches is they would build these churches. This one went up in about, 10 years or something. It was zip, zip, and it was up. And they the architects tried out different methods while they were in the, they tried out these different methods. And some of them worked and some of them fell down, and then they knew, well, we better not do that in the bigger church, so we better change that. So this is PARAY-LE-MONIAL. I think it's quite stunning. This is also known, this town is very well known because a woman in the 16th century had this vision that she was visited by God, by Jesus, and it's the Sacred Heart, which is a very, very, to this day, a very powerful movement. So here you can see these very simple, there's very little adornment on this, the Romanesque towers. The actual sculptures inside are less interesting. I love this door. This is the north portal on the side. You look at the beautiful, absolute beautiful work on the friezes and on the columns. That's the original door. I think that's quite spectacular. And then you go around the back. So this is the thing about the Cluniac model, was that you have the choir at the back, and then you had these protruding shapes coming out, and these are the chapels around it. And you have the ambulatory that goes around. You have the choir, then you have the ambulatory, and then you have these chapels sprouting off of them, and you have these beautiful cascading roofs. I think that in itself is art in itself. Just just the symmetry of the shapes, just absolutely spectacular. Okay, so and here you see one of the nuns from the of the Sacred Heart nuns. Anyway, so this is the entrance. You got again this double head. So this is very much a Cluniac thing, having the doubling of things, but I don't know what these things mean at all. I haven't researched it. If anyone does, please let me know. You go inside, here's the church. So you notice the arches here. This is a Romanesque church, but look at the arches. They're Gothic, and this has not been changed. And what happened was, and you had this in Cluny as well, I could have showed you that in the Cluny, is they used pointed arches inside, but they used rounded arches on the outside walls. And the reason why they did this is that, as we from Gothic churches, and Gothic came after this, you can achieve a greater height by having the pointed arch. And some people say that pointed arch comes from Cordoba and from the Moors, because they did have that a bit. The Armenians say that they had the originals back in about, I don't know, 900. They already had the pointed arches, but there's a lot of argument about that. But the interesting thing is, what Udo and I saw was them trying. So here you see a much steeper pointed arch than we've seen in some of the other churches, where they're pushing it to the boundary to see how far can we go with this. And you'll see that in lots, you see this is a different type of arch, a much broader one, and these were the architects. This is basically their playground, and they had hundreds of these churches that they were building, which is, I think, fascinating. So you have the great big Pantocrator there, which was a standard feature of Cluniac churches. And here you've got the different column tops. I'm not going to show you that more. You can look at it. I've sent it to you if you want to. So let's go. Let me just take you back to the map. And here's the map. Yeah. And no, we don't want that. No, shut up now. Okay, sorry about that. So let me just give you here. If we go back to the Romanesque towns, so here we've got the Roman. So we've just been here in Cluny. There's Cluny. Here's PARAY-LE-MONIAL. Let's go and look at a couple of churches down here. So this is Avennas and Charlieu. They're just over the border. Let's look at Avennas and ANCY-LE-DUC, because they're all part of this whole Cluny thing. But before we do that, let's just go to Berze-la-Ville. So Berze-la-Ville is here, very close by, and it's this stunning, beautiful. Go back to Lightroom. Here we are. And here, let's go to Berze-la-Ville, which is this little church in the countryside. You can see it, there's nothing around it. There is one quite close, but it's a tiny town. And you'll see it's also got the same shape, but this was just a small parish church. The interesting thing about it is you've got the church at the bottom. It's called the Chapel of the Capella da Mincia. And there's a downstairs, which is completely derelict, and then there's the upstairs. And these paintings are from 1100. They were painted, I think, between 1100 and 1110. And this is exactly how it would have looked in the Cluny church, except it would have been many, many times bigger. And the few features here, that it has a tripartite division. So you've got the top bit, you got the middle bit, and then you got the bottom bit. And there's a French word for it, but I can't remember it. You have you have the apostles in there. So actually, these are all saints down the bottom. At the top, you've got the Pantocrator. So this is Jesus in the mandorla. So the mandorla is like the placenta. It symbolizes rebirth. I mean, the mandorla is all sorts of things. It depends what you want it to be, but in this particular case, I want it to be a placenta. And because of it being a placenta, it symbolizes rebirth, and it's about the second coming, and it's about apocalypse and all the other stuff, the last judgment, and which is the topic that they bring over and over again. Here you can see the 6 apostles and the other 6 apostles. There's a couple of local dignitaries, they're local saints. Below, you've got all the saints below there. But I just wanted to show you these pictures. You can look at that again later. But it's incredible to think these things are 1,000 years old. And they're beautiful. They're just beautifully maintained. It's right out in the countryside. There's nobody there. It's completely semi-derelict. You can see the old barrel vaulted ceiling here with the original decorations on it. There's Saint Uta being patient. And actually Uta knows more about the subject than I do, because I'm just taking pictures and she's reading about it all the time. So Coul de Four, that's the name of that's the French word for the three-part thingy. Okay, so let's have a look at Avennes. So Avennes is not actually in Burgundy, but it's right on the border. This is a tiny little church, and you wouldn't really know about it at all. The reason why I want to show it to you is that this was done in about 1070, sorry, before all this stuff got going. And the person that did the carving, you see the altar down here. So the guy that did this, they call the Avennes master, and he did most of the Cluny stuff later. Remember, I told you they were mostly local stonemasons and local sculptors, and they learned the trade. So this is his first job. He must have been fairly young at the time. And here you can see it. So what you got here is you got Jesus in the middle, triumphant, and then you've got the various apostles here. Once again, I can be very clever and tell you which apostles they are. Not all of them, but because they are, hang on, come on. Here you can see their names, Jacob, Philip, Thomas. So they, there's a cheat sheet here. And so what you can notice, though, this is the style of the Avennes master. He did these deeply sculpted mandalas. He really sculpted the cloth, the way the cloth forms around the legs. It's very specific to him. Interesting thing is here you've got on the side, this is Saint Louis. So Saint Louis was the king of France, Louis IX. He was the one that, if you remember when we were in Avennes, I said that he, together with St. Bernard, so St. Bernard of Clairvaux, preached the Second Crusade from the steps of the church, and then they built the narthex over it. And King Louis of France beetled off led the crusade, and he brought back the crown of thorns and the nails from the cross, and he formed the New Jerusalem in Paris, and he kept the key from the safe where these things were kept in his chapel. Remember the chapelle in Paris, and every king of France, right up to the last one was decapitated in the French Revolution, had it around his neck, because that was his symbol and right to be king of France, because they were the New Jerusalem. Anyway, here you get Louis, and he was sainted, and he was a very saintly guy. Also killed tens of thousands of Cathar Christians in Languedoc, which was not so saintly, but he got a lot of land for that, so made it up, and he gave it to the church, which was then fine. So anyway, here King Louis is giving this church, this one that we're in, Avennes, to the local abbot or whatever he is. And there's a Latin inscription here, and there wasn't a good Latin translation, so I did it myself, so you'll have to excuse it. And I've got here roughly translated as King Louis, a pious and virtuous friend, offers the church. Vincent accepts this. That was his name, St. Vincentius. The stone records his decree. Death seals the pledge of the king forever. So the issue was that people that I read just didn't know how to translate Latin properly. And you get things like, anyway, you get the things like having this stripe over the thing below, and that of course changes what that is, not just a letter. So that's my translation. But what it means, though, is that King Louis has given this thing, and he says the stone records a decree. Okay, it's a legal contract. Death seals the pledge of the king forever. In other words, this is in perpetuity. So you remember we talked about it last time, that you had different types of grants, some of them were just for the lifetime. This was forever. And so, interesting thing. So you've seen a very early version, and this guy went on. So next place he went to was to ANCY-LE-DUC. So ANCY-LE-DUC is a beautiful place out in the right on the countryside, also a tiny little church. It was famous because Hugh of Poitiers, so there was the founder Bernard, the founder of the abbey that William gave the lands to, and he was together with Hugh of Poitiers, and Hugh of Poitiers was then eventually, he was like his hatchet man. So what happened with the Clunians is they reformed the church. So as I told you about the simony, the big issue was it was the simony issue. The second issue was that the monks all became very worldly, and because they owed their fealty to the local lords, they had to do what the local lords said. And the local lords said, look, we don't want to have all this praying stuff at the wrong time. So they didn't have to get up at 3 in the morning, but they made it much later. And then they changed the meal plan, and they had all sorts of parties there. In fact, yeah. So anyway, the monks were not doing what they were meant to do according to the way that Benedict of Nursia had set it up in the 400s. And so they weren't following the rule of Benedict of Nursia. So so Charlemagne had tried to sort of fix this whole thing himself, because there was a similar problem back around about 800. And there was a guy called Benedict of, I've never said it, I think it's Asciani or Asani. I've only read the thing, I can't remember exactly how it looks. So Benedict of Asani reformed all of and was in charge of all of the monasteries. And you remember Charlemagne basically reclaimed the land and reinstituted law and education through the establishment of monasteries. And a lot of them came from Ireland and from Scotland. He had the reformed law. So there's the second Benedict, there's Benedict of Asciani, so that was around about 800. And then in 900, in the early 900s, 910, when Cluny was founded, Bernard and also this Hugh reformed all of these different monasteries according to the law, the reform practice, and they try to get them to go back to being holy places where people followed the Benedictine law and style of living. And then when Hugh then was sent here, and then he died here, and he's buried here. So that became very important because of it, big pilgrimage place. And so here you see the church. Originally there were three portals here, but the French revolutionaries took care of that. So there's only one left. This is the big one in the middle, and it's quite spectacular. So let's just go right in there. So you'll see, you've got here's the tympanum, and then and then you got the lintel. Well, the lintel was done by somebody else. You'll see that, and he wasn't as good. So here you've got, so you can see you've got the same as the normal story. I mean, you can do this with your eyes closed after a while. You've got Jesus in the mandorla. You've got angels sort of holding him up, lifting him up to heaven. Here you've got the 12 apostles. Whoops, sorry about that. The 12 apostles below, sort of all pointing up and say, "Wow, look what's going on up there." And then you've got the 24 elders of the apocalypse. I think there's 20 here, and 4 of them were sitting on the column tops. But anyway, there's very few. You can only really recognize this one here. And they all have the two things. You'll see they have an instrument, a musical instrument, and they have a jug, because that's what you have in the Apocalypse of John, which was so important to them. So here you'll notice this is the Avenas master. Look at the way that this angel is just about to jump up in the air. You can see his, the weight is placed on his front foot. The back foot is just sort of leaving the ground. It's beautifully done. The sculpting of look at the way the robes flow here. It's incredible, absolutely amazing. Here you also get this deeply sculpted mandola. You can see also that just the weighting of the figure. It's very, very realistic. There's gravity to it. There's beautiful form, etc. If you look down the bottom here, I mean, look at the way these robes, they just hang. They've got a sort of standard hem at the bottom. There's no, look at this guy, the way he's standing. He must be a ballerina in the 4th position. It's just, it's not realistic. So you can see the difference between a really good sculptor and a not so good one. Unfortunately, this guy also did the inside bits as well. So enough of that one. So that was the Avenas master. We saw the Avenas master in Avenas. We saw him here. You saw the tones. Those were done by the Avenas master in Cluny, and each time he got better. He was improving as it went. So this is like an atlas, but this is fairly basic work. So I wanted to show you this for fun. So this is the octagonal towers, the original octagonal tower, which is incredible. And here you've got all underneath the roofs here, you've got all of these different figures that have been carved. So I'm just going to, so there you can see it in German. Okay, so I'll just sort of let you have a look at these. So I tell you that the people that did these were stone cutters. They weren't sculptors as such. Whereas the Avenas master, his job was sculpting. He wasn't a stone cutter. However, if you were a monk and you got too big for your boots, because some monks were good artists and they would get employed. They were obviously doing the scriptorio, they were doing all the drawings there, and some of them were better with a chisel than they were with a quill. Then they might then become sculptors, but they weren't allowed to sign their name and they weren't allowed to get too big for their boots. So in the rules of Benedict or of the Clunians, it says if the monk gets too big for his boots, then he has to go back to either working in the scriptoria or just become a stone chiseler, but he's not allowed to do sculpting anymore. So it's highly unlikely that these people were monks that were doing this. These were lay people that were specialized as sculptors, but they were locals and they learned their stuff. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed looking at that while I was rabbiting on. Let's go back in. Let's go inside. And so now these sculptures are old. These are much older than the ones that you've seen before. These were done around about 1050 or 1060. So 50, 70 years beforehand. And that's a long time in the development of things. So what's going on here, you might ask? And you'll get lots of different interpretations. So I'll give you a double interpretation here. So here we've got a devil pulling someone up, enticing them. We saw that last time with the music, if you remember. And there is a person playing music here on the left. So this is all about, again, the virtues and the vices. Have a look at the eyes. They're still the original eyes. So you got the music enticing people to do things that they shouldn't be doing. Here you have a two-headed body, whether they are doing the dance of the two-headed beast, if this is like sexual intercourse or not known. Then you have somebody who's falling down to their destruction. And so this thing gets interpreted variously. So the one is that, this is luxuria and music, people getting way misled. Another totally different interpretation, this is Adam and Eve, and then they give a totally different thing. So no one really knows is the answer. But this is fairly primitive if you think in comparison to what we saw before. Very primitive in its style. So I've given you two. I've given you a creation of Adam and Eve, and I've given you a luxuria. And from the Psychomachia. So let's see another one. So here we've got a guy, I think this is, what's his name again? This is Daniel with the lions. let me see what else we got. So we got Daniel and the lions. There's one here. So, okay, here we got Samson again. Remember the Samson story? Samson he's got his hands in the lion's mouth and he's killing him with his bare hands. That's the Samson story. And there was one I wanted to show you because you get, oh, this is an exciting one. Here. So I think it starts in the middle. And whoops, come on, get over there. So here, so you got two men tugging at the beards, right? So remember I said before, I showed you a number of times people tugging their own beard, people tugging each other's beard. So what this is showing is anger and I forget the other thing. It's a couple of these vices. It also has a sexual overtone to it. Evidently, it has a sexual meaning. You can see that these guys are not approving. They're sticking their tongue out and saying you guys are doing the wrong thing. Here, evidently, they are making up. They're saying, no, let's have peace, and this is the kiss of peace. Let's take that interpretation. And then on the other side, I'm not too sure what that guy's doing, but anyway, he's there. But then if you look a little bit further, you get here, where is it? I don't know what this is. Okay, here's the rivers. I think these are the two rivers of the four rivers. But there's another one here, and here you get the monkey. You see the monkey sitting here? So the monkey pretends to be a human, and the monkey is the devil. The devil pretends to be someone, someone good and tries to lure people. So again, the monkey's representing a devil who's trying to lure this poor guy into doing something that means he'll fry in hell forever. Okay, so again, this is modern though; it's not the original. And okay, let's just go. So if we go from there to within ANCY-LE-DUC, so on the property there is also the priory. So that you got the church and then you got the priory where they lived, and it has its own tympanum. This unfortunately in a very bad state. But if you look at it here you got the Eve story. Here's the snake and Eve's doing her thing. And then up here, there's the three wise men, and there's a whole apocalypse over here somewhere. It's a pretty busy thing, but it's very difficult to actually work out what's going on. So that's ANCY-LE-DUC, and I think let me just check my list. I got sort of bare bones things. So I got. We haven't seen SEMUR-EN-BRIONNAIS. I just want to show you SEMUR-EN-BRIONNAIS. There's Tournus as well, but I'm not going to do that because Alex showed you that before. So here's SEMUR-EN-BRIONNAIS. So what's SEMUR-EN-BRIONNAIS is it's on the top of a hill, and I haven't shown you all the monks yet, all the abbots. So you had, this is possibly exciting. So where have I got art history, list of popes? Yeah, here are the abbots of Cluny. So remember I said to you that, so 919, I thought it was 910, but anyway, Bernau, he's followed by Odo. So all three of them were together. The Hugh of Poitiers, Bernau and Odo, they were all in this abbey called Baume together, and they all moved together. And once Bernau plopped his clogs, then Odo took over. This guy was a sort of, these guys didn't really do anything, but Odilo came along. He ruled for about 55 years, and he was he was responsible for really building Cluny. Then you had Hugh I, who was for 60 years, and Hugh I was a big kahuna. He was actually, I think, the grandson of one of the dukes of Burgundy. So you had all this stuff about trying to keep separation between the church and the state. Well, it didn't really work. I mean, these guys had very big connections. Following Hugh came Pontius. So you had like 5 great ones that all were made saints. You had one guy who was an absolute as bad as they came, and then the rest were sort of pretty much no one really thinks about him. And this Pontius guy, so what happened was during, so the Cluniac abbots were very, very powerful, and they were extremely active in the political scene. So Odilo, for example, was highly active in bringing about, he was very active in bringing about peace and deciding things between aristocrats that were arguing with each other. Hugh I even more so. Hugh I was sort of like the #1 guy in the world at the time that you went to if you had a problem. And so he was, so when you had Henry II, you remember Henry II and then Henry IV. So Henry II, when he was crowned in Rome, he was given a golden ball by the Pope, and he gave that ball to Hugh. He gave it to the abbey. Also he gave his crown, which was also a great big golden thing. And the mother, so now that's Henry II, the emperor, but then there's also Henry I of England married Eleanor of, so Matilda. So you had Matilda, I don't know, are we talking the direct descendant of Oliver Cromwell? Not of Oliver Cromwell, of the Norman, William of the Norman king that invaded England. So Matilda gave a huge candelabra, which was 9 feet tall, and it looked like, you know, one of these menorah things, also made out of, I think, gold, solid gold. All this stuff was standing there. Everyone was giving them all sorts of presents, so they had all this stuff. So along comes Pontius. So Pontius took over 1109, and he was a real dirtbag, and he started selling off and doing all sorts of stuff, and eventually they couldn't take it anymore. He was sent to Rome, and he was stripped of his privileges. He was stripped of his abbacy, and so he got a whole lot of mercenaries, came back, invaded Cluny, took Cluny, melted down all this gold stuff and gave it to his mercenaries for pay. Well, then they chased him out again, and in came Hugh II. So quite an interesting part. And then you have Peter the Venerable that I told you about last time, who was at Berze-la-Ville, and who established really the principles behind the iconographic program there. A very great guy. Also the protector of Peter Abelard. Does anybody here know about Abelard and Heloise? You should read it. The Cloisters is a novel, which is something you should really read. Wonderful. Peter Abelard was a great guy, and Peter the Venerable protected him against that evil skunk Bernard of Clairvaux, who also became a saint. And anyway, you can read about what happened. I won't describe it now because there are ladies present. Okay, back to, so anyway, the point I wanted to make before I went off on this huge diversion is that back here, you had Hugh, and Hugh I was Hugh of Semur. All right, so Hugh of Semur. And so where he came from, he was also descended from the major royal family there. And so let's go to Hugh of Semur, his place, SEMUR-EN-BRIONNAIS. Apologies to any French people from slaughtering your language, but there you go. So, and this is on the top of a hill. There's a castle there, and we didn't go into the castle because there's just the keep left, and it was more of a gift shop. But that's where he was born, and that's, so once he became abbot, he made sure they got a hunking great church there. And this church, this is the church. So you can see here the same apsoidal, the same style, the chapels at the back, and there's Otto walking down to it. This is on the right. It's still a very active nunnery there, and this is the church. Still just like it's okay. I think that's Gothicized. And let me zip along. So here you see the church. It's fairly small. It's a standard thing. You come in through the main door, and you've got a side door over here, the north portal, and then you've got the three the main aisle and the two side aisles, etc. Okay, so then you got here, you see the little chapels, very standard pattern. Also built around about 1110, somewhere around there, 1100. I mean, the final style. You see some of the. Okay, here comes a nun coming out of. This is the north portal. And then we get here. So this is a different guy that's doing it. So here you can see this is the front of the building. So this is the front. Here you can see quite an elaborate entrance. Only a single entrance. Up at the top is the Lamb. That's the Lamb of God. If we had to look at Charlieu, then you would see that the same guy did both of them, and this is his little signature mark. Beautiful columns there. There's the Lamb. Here, standard story: Jesus and the Mandorla, or God or Jesus. The signs of the evangelists, the four evangelists, and below, this is the interesting bit I wanted to show you. This is the local saint. I don't think, and no, I can't remember his name. He was known as the hammer of the Arians. And you remember the Arians, this was the whole thing in 325 with the Council of Nicaea. The Council of Nicaea, remember, it was between the Arians, was the main topic, is it the Trinity as spoken by the Catholic, now Catholic Church, then the proto-Orthodox, or is it the other form, the actually more credible form of that the Father and the Son? So the Trinitarians say that the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost all are contemporaneous. The Arians said no, the Son comes after the Father, and so he must have been born later, and that was a huge topic. So anyway, this is Saint somebody or other, who was the hammer of the Arians. And so here he is sitting, they sitting here and laughing at him. Then here you move on to scene 2, and you get the angel coming down and sort of enabling him and he's sitting on the floor, and they're laughing at him still, but he wins in the end, is the whole sort of upshot of the story. And you have on the far right, you have something which I've never been able to actually work out who this Leo is. This is Pope Leo, who was evidently some sort of anti-pope, and his soul is being pulled out of his mouth by the devil, which is a sweet feature. And but I don't know which Pope Leo it is. So there you go. Let me see. I have the name of it in here somewhere. Saint-HILAIRE, that's his name. Okay, so if you go inside, here's the church. It's quite simple, but you'll notice also that they have slightly pointed arches. They were also doing that here. And one interesting feature that I think is, there's another nun sitting there. There's a nun down on the left side. Is this gallery? Yeah. Oops. So hang on. Here at the back. So you see this thing here. So this was an echo gallery, and evidently in Cluny, they had the same thing. And what had happened is you'd have some monks standing here, and then you had everybody else in the front of the church or near the choir, and they would echo at each other, and they'd sing slightly out of step and have this echo effect. So that's an echo gallery. Good. Well, I would say we've done our 1.5 hours already quite handsomely. Anybody want to thank you so much for listening for so long. Anyone want to talk about something, ask questions, say something? No? All right.
I think I'm going to have to read the Bible and everything else is supporting literature. There's so much knowledge in your head. It's very good, very entertaining.
A lot to digest, Tom, but it was fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm pleased. Yeah, the
Thanks
thing
so
is,
much, Tom.
there's the faith of the Bible, and there's people with faith that are reading the Bible in order to understand their faith. and there are people that read the Bible because of its historic content and saying, what is the history behind the Bible? And what is, what is fact, what is not fact, where just studying it purely from an historian's point of view and saying, okay, so this is definite, this is conjecture, this doesn't agree, how was it put together, what order? It's a huge subject, it's utterly fascinating. And that has nothing to do with faith at all. You can be a totally faith-led person and at the same time just try and find out how it's put together. So I highly recommend it. I can recommend lots of books to read. The great Bart Ehrman, for example, is a good place to start. E-H-R-M-A. Bart, B-A-R-T, and then Ehrman, E-H-R-M-A. Yeah, I think he's a lecturer in theology at Chapel Hill. I think he's Chapel Hill in North Carolina.
I was beginning, I can never do enough reading to keep up with what we're doing in art history, actually, which is a difficulty because then I just have a pile of books that pile up. But I'd got one on the Gnostics, so I was reading about that. But I mean, there are so many aspects to this whole subject of religion, aren't there? And half the stories you were referring to in the column toppings there, they're not in the Bible at all. They're all the other stuff. I mean, I've got a copy of the Goldene Legende, or a modern version of it, and all those stories are there, and you think, God, that's a whole load more stories that had nothing to do with the Bible, but they are the basis of all that later, all those beautiful pictures everywhere in Bayern, in all the museums and things, are all based on this second version of the saints and everyone who came around. There's just so much to it, isn't there? And so the Bible stories from going to Sunday school as a child are just one pitiful, tiny bit. It's very good that you have all the knowledge in your head, so much, and that you can spew it all out. It's very, very entertaining.
Well, the great thing about art is, art is a record that goes through the time, and art is the sort of pivot for me, the fulcrum that all of these things come off. You can see it's visual, and then you go off and read this stuff because you try and say, well, let me find out about this Hillary guy and what did that mean, and huge record. And you must say Wikipedia, I noticed that Wikipedia gets edited thoroughly. So for example, if you read the Cluniac Wikipedia entry, they don't mention the bad guy at all. He just does not get mentioned. And it's as though he didn't exist, because you still have Cluniacs nowadays, and they don't want to mention Pontius of Melguel because he doesn't fit into the story. And there's a huge amount of editing takes place. And then the problem is you get gaps and people say, well, what happened? And they make it up, or else they're using Roman sarcophagi and they have to explain what those symbols are, which of course have nothing to do with Christianity at all. So they say, well, those are angels, and there's a circle in the middle. Well, that's the mandorla, and there's the stick of Jesus in the middle of it, and hey presto, and this is such a huge subject. And the golden legend that you refer to, so that was written around about the 11th century, and it was because they had all these stories that had gathered over the past 600-800 years, a huge amount of explanation as to what had happened. Like, for example, there's two stories in the Golden Legend on the Helen finding the true cross, two different ones. And you'll find, so if you're going in Italy, for example, and you're going to, we'll see these churches where you have these wonderful paintings, the whole choir is all filled with the paintings, and you'll have, so the one in Volterra, for example, is the one story, and then you go a little bit further to Arezzo, and in Arezzo there's the Franciscan church where they painted the other one. And that, of course, is, you know, the best one. I mean, it's just incredible. So, and you look at it and think, hang on, what's going on? This is not the same story.
Yeah.
And it isn't, because
they
they're two.
reading?
Then you know, there are 2 Ten Commandments. You can choose which one you want.
Yes,
Anyway.
it's certainly
Well,
interesting.
thank you so
Very
much
good.
for
No, thank you. Thank you very much for doing it indeed. And what are you doing next week?
we'll go down to Moisac and to Conques. We did, you know, Conques. We did that with Alex. She sort of showed it briefly, and those are in the Aquitanian area, and so it's not Burgundy, and they're very different. And I'll probably show a bit of Saint-Saëns in Toulouse as well.
Okay.
You know, and just sort of wrap it up.
What time of year did you do the Burgundy tour? Was it spring or autumn, or a rainy time of year?
We're in July. We're in July. Because it was spectacular weather. We were in Chablis and all those places, and the Chevalier. It was stunning, absolutely stunning.
Yeah, lovely jubbly. Thank you very much. Okay, maybe I'll see you next week.
Yeah. Goodbye then. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Tom.
Thank you.